Good evening and welcome to Spotlight Seward, the show where we explore the issues, people, and history of Seward, Alaska. My name is Jim Pfeifenberger and I'll be your host, and we have a very exciting show for you this evening. We're going to take you down to Seward's waterfront on a mock archaeological expedition with the students of Seward Elementary, and we'll take an in-depth look at the creations of local artist Sandy Stoley. But first, we'll go back in time to investigate the mystery of the Russian ship Phoenix right after these messages. Do you find yourself feeling kind of low on energy this time of year? Visit the Resurrect Art Coffee House. Fuel for your spirit. Witness the beauty. Experience the adventure. Come along on a journey across the Harding ice field. White Winds, a journey across the Harding ice field, will take you to the heart of the Kenai Mountains, where one of the last remaining ice fields in the world forms a land of frozen beauty. Come along on the video adventure of a lifetime. White Winds, a journey across the Harding ice field, can be yours for just $12.95. Call 224-2697 to order your copy today. Welcome back to Spotlight Seward. In our first story tonight, we take you back in search of the first European settlement in Resurrection Bay as we explore the mystery of the Phoenix. In 1793, under the direction of Alexander Baranov, a group of Russian fur hunters established a small village in Resurrection Bay. Their goal was to build a ship from local materials, in part to further their hunting efforts, and in part to convince the Russian crown that they deserved a monopoly on hunting furs in Alaska. Their task proved nearly impossible, but after 18 months of hardship and with a great deal of native assistance, the Phoenix was launched in September of 1794 in Resurrection Bay. Though it is clear from the historical record that the Phoenix did exist, and that it was indeed built in Resurrection Bay, a mystery remains today. Just where, exactly, was this shipyard? Was it somewhere on Lowell Point? Or perhaps at the south end of town, near the ferry dock? Some have suggested the small boat harbor or lagoon area, and still others say 4th of July Creek, Cain's Head, or Tonsina Point. Will we ever know, or will the mystery remain? I spoke with Lee Pileski, president of the Resurrection Bay Historical Society, about the mystery of the Phoenix.
Given the evidence that I've seen so far and reading others, I would say somewhere on the town site.
And what evidence is that you would quote?
Well, the maps, we've got 3 different maps over the years. They all seem to show the location shipyard at the head of the bay. They're not the most accurate maps, therefore you may, someone may say this bump is low point or that bump is not. But they're all toward the head of the bay, which would seem logical, therefore, would be where the town site is. Whether it be on the north or the south, that's somewhat of a question there. There is a man who wrote us a letter, and he brought up a point I hadn't realized before, that Lowell Creek, when the original landing was made in 1903, Lowell Creek ran along Bear Mountain and flowed out about where the waterfall is now. Of course, and his point was that would then been a logical place to have a shipyard. Of course, 1903, 1794, there's a lot of difference there, but it's quite possible the creek could have run north sometime along the line there. Lagoon area, and that was a real lagoon at one time. We forget that now. You know, there was the railroad built a causeway across there, but the road and stuff didn't exist. And of course, in 1794, we don't really know what it looks like. Unfortunately, we have no real accurate map of that period. We have some sketches by Shields, the shipwright. They're a little vague, although felt there was mountains in the background, or there were mountains in the background. Sort of by imagination, I sketched them in. It was hard to tell from the photocopy we have of the original where mountains end and clouds begin, but using my best judgment and trying not to be prejudiced or anything, and actually I wasn't. When I sketched them in, I had no idea what what it might turn out to be. But when I sketched in the mountains, it appeared to me to be Mount Marathon with one of the peaks behind it. And the only place you can actually see something like that is down the small boat harbor area, be on the north side. You know, someone else might see it differently.
One person who definitely sees it differently is Mac Eads, a 50-year resident of the Seward area.
Well, we think it was on the south side of Lowell Point, which we call South Beach, which is a fairly steep sand beach there, which is about the only place in the bay you could launch a ship by hand. As far as I know, the Russians never had any horses.
No, I don't believe they did.
And they must have launched it by manpower with blocks and tackles and tallow, skid boards, you know, and tallow, which they would have plenty of barrels of tallow.
In the late 1950s, Mac made a very intriguing discovery at Lowell Point.
See, the people that originally homesteaded the south side of Lowell Point, his name was Jerry and Jean Martin, and they had a nice house there just up from the beach, just a little ways. It's pretty close to where those condos are right now. And toward the mountain and back from their place, while we were back in the woods there one day, and we saw these ridges in the dirt there parallel to the beach. And right away we could see that it was built for shipways of some sort, because if you'd put timbers crossways on those, they'd have room to walk under a boat to work on it, and you'd have the timbers there for skidways to the beach. And of course, if we were going to build a boat like that without any tools, we'd build it right on butter boards. And then when you go to launch them, then you just start them with a jack or whatever, and then they slide pretty easy. You get a little downgrade on them.
In fact, the old Russian illustrations of the Phoenix show it sitting on a raised timber framework, and the only known diagram of the shipyard clearly shows a shipways parallel to the beach, much like the one Mac described.
Well, I guess what has always gotten to me is, why would the Russians stop? The favorite places have been over the years Tonsina, Cain's Head, Lowell Point, and Seward. But I always seemed, if you were at one, why wouldn't you go to the next? Or why would you say, well, there's a little bigger place down there? And, it just seems logical you keep going. I don't know. You know, the Russians may not have been logical. It's hard to say.
I asked Mac what he thought about Cain's Head or Tonsina Point.
There's no suitable place to launch one on those places. The only place that we can see in this bay that was suitable to build and launch a ship of that size would be on South Beach at Lowell Point, because it's the only place that has a steep enough beach to where the tide would come in, where they could work it down to low water, the tide would come in and float the vessel.
My inclination is the town site, from what I've seen.
I decided to gather a few more opinions, so I hit the streets of Seward and asked people where they thought the Phoenix was built.
I guess out of Low Point, I don't know. That's my best guess, or Tonsina.
I have absolutely no idea.
Do you know?
At Low Point?
Across the way there?
I think it's right under where they're building the Sea Life Center, personally,
And what makes you think that?
because nobody's found it anywhere else.
I know exactly where they built it. Built it right at the Yellow Lab, which is on the IMS campus. It's right under there, I know it.
And how do you know this?
Well, I've looked at the old sketch, and I can tell by the wave pattern, the waves breaking on the shore there, that that's exactly where it was.
Okay.
It's the only place for it. That's the real reason. It's the only place for it. The rest is a little bit hypothetical.
I haven't got the slightest idea.
Right.
I have no idea.
I probably ought to know that.
Mac Eads and his friends actually found more than just ridges of earth at Lowell Point.
You can see stumps of trees that have been logged years, like hundreds of years ago. Old logging. And then we found in that area, we found some old woodworking tools like adzes, axes, hammers, and there was one drill bit that was like a bracing bit all in one. That wasn't the kind like we have now where you can put bits into a brace. It was just a piece of iron with a bit on it that you could drill holes with. And we could see that it looked like shipbuilding tools.
So what became of those tools that you found?
Well, we gave them to, we can't remember very well. You have to remember, I'm 75 and he's 73, so we don't remember too well. But in any case, we gave them either to the Moose Bar, which was owned by Ross Mann, or the Northern Bar, which we think was owned by Leo Douglas. And they displayed them up on the shelf behind the bar there for a number of years before the bar burnt down, and of course that was the end of those.
The artifacts were lost forever in the fire, but other evidence has appeared. The Historical Society turned up a map of the Phoenix's voyages, which clearly shows many trips into Resurrection Bay, but not with enough detail to pinpoint the village location. Another piece of evidence comes in the form of a letter that Alexander Baranov wrote to Grigory Shelikov in 1794. I chose this bay in order to hinder communication between Kenai and Chugach over the nearest neck of land, he wrote.
It seemed like if they were interested in cutting off the trade, they would want to be as close to the trails as possible. It wouldn't do much. You couldn't do a lot of cutting off trade if you were at Tonsina or Kane's Head, even at Lowell Point. You'd almost have to be in this general area.
The Historical Society also has a letter on file from Charles Sheldon, one of the first postmasters in Seward, which reads, "There was a boat built at Lowell Point about 1901, which might have fooled a lot of people." I asked Mac Eads if he had ever heard about this 1901 ship.
Heard of a ship being built in Seward except the ones that the Russians built. I heard that the Russians built two here, but I don't know about that either.
And others have suggested there was some more shipbuilding there during the gold rushes up in Hope and Sunrise, building ships that could lighter goods into the Hope and Sunrise. So there is evidence that there was a shipyard on Lowell Point, if it was, a recent one.
Built something there. There's no question about that.
It wasn't.
And all the timbers that were there that they launched that ship on were either taken away at that time or they all rotted away because there was absolutely no squared timbers there whatsoever. But if that had been a ship that was built in 1901, where you're looking at 55 years there, they wouldn't have been rotted away.
There's also some evidence that when the Russians left here, they took the buildings with them. I mean, they dismantled things and took them with them, especially the iron. They were always short of iron, although that's a little vague too.
Will we ever solve this mystery? Is there any definitive evidence? Why not go to Lowell Point to examine these ridges of earth, which could be the remains of a shipways?
Because it's been excavated there when they built those condos out there, what, 8 or 10 years ago. They had plans of building a harbor in there. And so they excavated that area, the entire area where that was. It's been excavated, there's nothing there but just a depression in the ground. The harbor was never built, but they ruined the area.
I have a firm, I guess you say, belief, or maybe just hope, that someday someone is going to dig something out of the archives and say, this is it. This is where it was. The X, the final X there.
But the beach at South Beach there at Lowell Point, it dropped right straight off the 10,000 water. So it's really a nice place. I was going to build a ship, that's where I built it.
And they're very persuasive. It is very hard once you start reading the arguments for Lowell Point, especially. They're very persuasive. But again, there's no real evidence one way or the other historically.